Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first of our industry-specific webinars. Today, we're going to deliver a webinar for our police forces customers and non-customers on the topic of reducing stress in emergency services contact centers. So we're happy that you're here. It's nice to have you with us, and we hope that today's session is about an hour long. We hope it's going to be useful and informative, and you're going to get some helpful hints and tips and tricks to take away so that you can lower stress amongst your agents in your contact center. At the moment, we're broadcasting webinars from two of the presenters. I'm going to just very quickly introduce you to the team that's behind today's webinar. You can see there myself and Steve, the CEO of SGS Solutions. We're both currently on webcam. We're going to duck out in a minute of the webcam so that you guys can focus on the presentation we've prepared. Are you there, Steve?
Yeah, I'm here, Danny. Thank you very much. Looks like we've got a few people joining, so that's all good. I think we can probably leave it another minute, Danny, until we actually start the presentation. But yeah, carry on with your intro.
Yeah, no worries at all, mate. Thanks for letting me know about that. So Steve is here, and I'm sure everyone in the room knows Steve. He's our CEO and the brains behind SJS and Optimise. I'm Daniel Baker. I'm the head of marketing. My background is in training. I'm a teacher by training and a psychologist by training, a scientist, and my background is in delivering workshops, teacher training, upskilling, corporate training, that kind of stuff. And I do a bit of design work as well and marketing, so that's why I'm kind of here. And I put together today's webinar with the help of the lovely Steph and the lovely Sarah. Steph, are you with us?
I am. Hello, everybody.
And I'm sure everyone also knows Steph's name, face, and voice. She is our optimized training guru and deployment person, and she's dealt with you all, I'm sure, very personally, very professionally before today. And finally on the call, we have, of course, Sarah. Sarah is currently wishing for the end of lockdown. I think she's a bit bored of it now, aren't you, Sarah? Are you with us, Sarah?
Hi, UK. Yeah, I am. Very bored.
Yeah. Still bored of lockdown?
Yes. Ready to get back into the office.
Yeah, I'm sure lots of people feel the same way, mate. On your screens as well now, you can also see how you can learn more about Optimise, our product. And we would also like to ask you to please follow us on our social media channels. We've got YouTube, we've got Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn there. At this point, I'm going to turn off my webcam so that I can disappear into the background and focus on presenting our workshop or webinar that we have for you today. So I'm just going to do that, and I'll see you later. I wanted to kind of start off today's webinar by talking just a little bit quickly about the planned outcomes we have. So by the end of this hour, we hope that you all know these two things: a little bit more about the neuroscientific approach behind SCARF and how this information can be used daily to help to reduce stress and optimize contact centers around the world. I mean, in fact, any environment, really, this works in. And we want to also make you a little bit aware of how traditional wallboard design is actually maybe sort of contributing to the kinds of problems and stresses that you might be finding yourself dealing with on a daily basis. And by the end of the webinar, we hope that you are able to use information that we've given you about SCARF and motivation and psychology to help motivate your agents and lower their stress and reduce some of these expensive workforce issues that we hear a lot about from our clients and our customers and that kind of thing. And we're going to help you, hopefully, with some tips and tricks that you can then use to design your own SCARF compliant visuals, which again, all has the focus of lowering stress, reducing expensive workforce issues, and so on. The reason why, and the rationale behind why we're kind of doing these industry-specific webinars is to do with the bigger kind of mission, vision, and purpose of SJS. And I've been with the company only about 3 months now, and I kind of know that the company is known as the wallboard people, or as our provider of wallboards. And part of my remit and part of my goal as head of marketing is we kind of want to shift our focus a little bit to the actual core values and mission of our company. So our company and our mission and our vision and our purpose is actually a little bit bigger. It's a bit broader than just providing amazing wallboards. We want to be known as the contact center optimization specialists. And we believe we have the tools, the knowledge, and the skills to do that. So you can see here the SJS mission, our vision, and our values. And this mission, vision, and values underlines the work that we're doing with our outreach, our webinars, our new training, our consultancy, which goes above and beyond just delivering amazing wallboard software, which we'll continue to do, but that's the kind of rationale behind what we're doing today. So that's that blurb out of the way. So lots of people in today are from our various police force customer base. SJS, as you can see there, we now support 8 major UK police force contact centres. And we talk to our customers regularly and frequently. And the feedback we get from them indicates that all of them are experiencing the same kinds of expensive problems, namely high staff turnover, high levels of stress, high levels of absenteeism, and along with that, high recruitment and high retraining costs. And we hear this a lot, not just from police force contact centers, but from all different kinds of contact center environments. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. These 4 expensive issues don't exist in a vacuum or by themselves. They actually can be seen, in my opinion, in our opinion, as a cycle, okay? More so in a high stress workplace like a police force contact center, which is a very stressful workplace environment anyway. So in actual fact, it's probably likely that what you're in at the moment is kind of a cycle, and it will be a repeating cycle unless we can find ways to help you to lower this initial high level of stress. Because of course, high levels of stress is going to then cause high levels of absenteeism, which is going to cause high staff turnover and ongoing recruitment costs and problems and training and more stress and more absenteeism and so on and so on and so on and so on. We go round the circle like that. What we want to help you do is to break the cycle by lowering that initial sort of first level of stress in the workplace. And the approach that I know you probably heard us talk about quite a lot is this idea of SCARF. And I'm not sure how many of you are aware what SCARF is. So I thought, with my background in training and psychology, that I would take you through a little bit about the background knowledge to do with SCARF today. So the SJS kind of difference, what makes us different, is that we want to use neuroscience to help you influence others and improve your workplace environment, to improve your contact center environment. And we believe the way to do that is through SCARF. Now, in case you didn't know, SCARF, you can see it there, it's an acronym, and it represents 5 domains that influence human behavior. And I've put that in the workplace, but it could be in any situation, not just the workplace. And all of these things, I think any of us can relate to. So this guy, David Rock, he is a neuro leadership expert. And he says that our behavior is influenced by status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And each of those things spells out the word SCARF. And underneath that, I've put a little sentence there to explain what each of those domains represent. So status is how important we perceive ourselves in the eyes of others. Certainty refers to our capacity to predict the future, not in the sense that we've become psychic, but in the sense that we can have confidence about what's going to happen. We have some feeling of control over that. Autonomy is linked to that as well. Okay, so those two things go together, obviously. Relatedness deals with our perception of how we feel we can connect to other people and how safe we feel around them. And fairness speaks for itself. It's how we feel we're being treated in relation to our own behavior. This is important because knowing a bit about SCARF can help you optimize and reduce stress in any situation, not just in the workplace, not just in the contact center, but in any situation. And the reason is this: anytime that someone does something to you or does something to me which lowers any of these feelings, so anytime something happens that might lower our sense of status, that reduces our certainty, that lowers our autonomy, makes us feel less related or treated unfairly, what happens is something that's very interesting, and this has been supported by evidence from MRI scans of the brain. Anytime that something happens to somebody which lowers any of the 5 SCARF domains, what happens is there's an increase in something called social pain. Now, social pain is a term that describes a kind of pain that's perceived in the brain. And it's perceived in the same part of the brain as physical pain. So it's using the same brain resources, the same oxygen, the same glucose. It's processed in the same way as pain. And once the body begins to experience any kind of pain, the reaction is certain, it's known, and it's guaranteed. So if you stub your toe on the door, if you shut your hand in the car door, if you cut your finger with a sharp knife, the response pathway in the brain, in the body, is the same as if somebody treats you unfairly, lowers your certainty, or reduces your status. And the first thing that happens, of course, is always hormonal, because hormones are what drive our behavior. And when you lower status, you lower certainty, you lower autonomy, you increase pain. It doesn't matter that social pain is quote unquote different than physical pain because they're processed in the same way. That means you're guaranteed to cause an adrenaline release in that person. Whenever that happens, you get a fight or flight response, which is the traditional, as everybody knows, you either stand your ground and you fight that threat, or you run away from it. And those of you in the room today that will work in contact centers, you know which of your agents are the ones that when they feel threatened, status reduced, less autonomy, you know which ones are going to stand there and they're going to fight you, and which ones will run away. Run away could literally be running away, like physically running away from you, but most often it translates into absenteeism, sickness, and staff turnover. The good news is it's very easy to do things that increase people's status, certainty, autonomy, sense of relatedness, and sense of fairness. And the opposite pathway is equally guaranteed. So anytime that you do anything to increase somebody's status, to give them important certainty, to treat them fairly, you not only decrease social pain perception, which is very important, but actually what else you cause to happen is you cause a different hormone to be released called dopamine. Now, dopamine is the hormone that makes us check our phones every 5 seconds to see if we've got any new Facebook messages or WhatsApp messages or texts or emails. Dopamine is the habit-forming hormone. And it does that because when dopamine is released, people feel rewarded. They feel calm, they feel safe, they feel relaxed, they feel rewarded. And that's a very addictive feeling. It's the psychology and physiology behind smoking, behind addiction, behind even things like I said, social media checking, email checking, all those things link back to dopamine. So it's incredibly powerful. And it's a guaranteed response. So the response in both situations, when you lower someone's scarf domains or when you increase someone's scarf domains, the response pathway is guaranteed to happen. And in this webinar today, we want to talk to you a little bit more in the coming remaining time about some ways that you can increase people's status, certainty, autonomy, and so on. The great thing about SCARF is, now that you know about it, now that you're aware of it, you can actually begin to influence people's behavior just by knowing this. Studies have shown that knowing this information about SCARF and the hormone pathways gives you self-awareness and self-certainty. And this will subconsciously, actually, moving forwards from today, this will affect how you behave. And that will be enough on its own. If you did nothing else today, apart from just learned about SCARF, that will influence your behavior in ways that you can then influence other people in positive ways. So believe it or not, people will be subconsciously aware that you have certainty, and that will give them certainty. That's a bit of a win-win situation. And the SCARF domains and the reward and pain pathways that underline it, they are the basis for all the work we do at SJS with Optimise and with our workshops and with our training. So at this point, a nice little sort of natural segue into an example template we put together for the police forces. I am going to hand over to our CEO, to Steve Pace, and he's going to take us through this template here, and he's going to talk about how this template is going to help give agents certainty and autonomy. So I'm going to hand over to you, Steve, and I'm going to share the live demo.
Thank you very much, Danny. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, you can hear me okay? Fantastic. It's funny you talking about all of that, Danny, as my time was sort of getting closer. Even though I've done these sort of webinars so many times over the years, you can still feel that leaking of adrenaline into the blood and body temperatures changing in preparation for exactly what you were talking about, that fight or flight response. So I'm not going to run out the door, you'd be pleased to know, but I'm going to talk to you about this, this presentation, and what Daniel was talking about is absolutely fascinating. And yeah, he's absolutely right. If you can embrace SCARF, maybe do some of your own research about it, it's definitely going to be beneficial to anybody that manages people, because we all have a human brain, we all have adrenal glands, and we're all managed by those hormones. So quickly, I want to just talk about this template, but also talk about communication in the workplace. So all forms of communication in the workplace will have an impact on the people who work in them. And this could be any type of communication, from cork boards, notice boards, whiteboards, and obviously to those TV screens that you've got hanging up in your control rooms and contact centers, in that very, very specific position of authority almost. You know, they're in a position where you want people to take notice of them, and you want people to react to the information that's being displayed on them. So they are extremely important, and the content that you share has to be right. Unfortunately, traditional dashboards, which are still being sold with the promise of delivering improvements in customer experience, by their very nature, they exclude the key elements that are needed to encourage and support your call handlers, which means more often than not, those traditional wallboards fail to deliver the changes in behavior that you need as organizations to deliver the improvements in call handling, customer experience, or any of the improvements that you want to make around those workforce issues that Danny talked about. So if we look at this template here, this is police specific, and this is something that Sarah created for us using the optimise product. And what we've tried to do here is we've tried to combine the elements of SCARF and also try to reduce call handler stress by creating an environment where the changes in behaviour that you need to take place to improve can actually occur. So what you'll see here is, you'll see, as an example, you'll see we've got 2 scrolling messages. Now those scrolling messages are there to help you communicate with your call handlers. They are there to increase autonomy. They are there to increase certainty. So for example, if you had an incident in your local area, let's say there's a march and people are congregated in a city centre. I know there's a lot of this sort of stuff going on at the moment. You can open up the optimise screen director, you can go in there and you can just punch in a message letting your call handlers know what's going on, where it's happening, and even give them advice as to how to handle those types of calls. So that would be one example of an instant scrolling message. You can also schedule content to appear in those scrollers. So if you've got something that you know is going to happen, if a march has been scheduled to happen next month, or you have a road closure happening in your local area, and you know when that's going to happen, you can, before time, you can prepare the information you want to share with those call handlers. And that's really, really useful because it's giving them the autonomy and the certainty that they need, and it's helping you to reduce their stress. Another example of how you can use those scrolling messages would be to link them to an RSS feed. So you have a live feed into maybe some traffic news or local news or other community specific news, or even a Twitter feed, so people can see what's being said on social media and they feel more connected to, in your case, the public and what the public are saying about the local area or the police force as a whole. Now, in addition to this information, you can see we've got other information that's flashing up on the screen, and we've also got a virtual notice board. So you'll see at the moment you've got your most calls handled panel that's appeared, and that's appeared because you have enough agent availability, and the contact center is performing quite well. So we've got this kind of good news panel here which talks about performance. Now, when your agent availability drops and your calls in queue start to increase, then that panel will swap for a more of a tips and advice type panel. And again, with Optimise, you can get the content to change dependent on the performance of the contact center, whereas a traditional wallboard will just display all of your call handling metrics all of the time. So what you can do with these notice boards and with pop-up messages is you can make sure that you keep supporting those call handlers and that you remind them of the techniques that you've taught them in your training. Now, I'm sure, well, I know for a fact from talking to the likes of Rebecca, who I know is on the call, and other police forces, that you guys invest a huge amount in training your officers. And one of the areas that you would focus on is dealing with abusive calls, for example. Now, if you're a new call handler and you're new to the force, your brain will function much more efficiently if you get some reminders about the training that you had. So training, generally, you only remember 30%. So if you use those virtual notice boards to remind those handlers of how to deal with abusive calls, for example, language they should use, language they shouldn't use, and other tips and advice, not only are you supporting them, which is considered to be much more fair, which is the F in SCARF, you're also giving them the opportunity to access that information in their brains and react accordingly. And hopefully that will help them handle those calls and then reduce their stress. So you've got incidents, you've got scrolling messages, you've got tips and advice. All of these techniques are designed to increase autonomy, increase certainty, and lower those stress hormones. Now you'll notice that even with all of these different SCARF compliant communication forms that we have on this template, your key handling metrics and the alerts that trigger reminders about, when to answer more calls, when to take breaks, and so on and so forth, around resource levels, all that type of stuff, that's still happening. So even with all of that communication, and even with all of that positivity and SCARF compliant content, we're not sacrificing your call handler's chances to improve your call handling KPIs. So other examples of the types of things that you could put on the screen: you could remind agents when to take breaks, you could remind agents when not to take breaks, and you can link that to your metrics. And you can have metrics coming from your phone system, but you can also have metrics coming from other sources as well. And that's something that we may be talking to you about in part 2 of this webinar. So finally, this template, if you think about all of the information that we're sharing with the individuals that have got very, very difficult tasks on their hands, every time you provide them with support, every time you provide them with information that's going to make their lives easier, not only do you reduce stress, but you also drive their status higher because you're treating them in the best possible way. And in the case of the message that you can see there, where it congratulates people for work that they've done well, but when the contact center is performing well, you're increasing their status and you're balancing out the often negative information that these screens can be filled with. So in the same way that you would tell agents that calls are in queue and that you want them to do what they can, which can often be very limited in what they can do, but you want them to do what they can to reduce the calls in queue and increase your SLA. You also need to create that balance, create that fairness by having positive triggers as well. So when things are going well, lots of green, lots of pop-up messages to say that things are going well and to thank the team for doing a great job. So any other metrics that you've got that you can use to celebrate success, then those metrics can also be introduced onto those optimise templates, and you can create those celebrations automatically. So rather than having to go in, punch in the message, and then tell the system which screens to display it on, you set those triggers up beforehand, so you know that your environment is balanced, it's fair, it's increasing autonomy, it's increasing certainty, it's increasing status. And when things go well, people are rewarded. And when things go badly, you ask them to do what they can to deal with whatever it is that's going badly, which in this case is often calls in queue. So that was a lot of information. I understand that. Anybody that's already using the optimized system, if you don't know how to do those things, then come back to us and we'll provide you with the right level of support to do that. Those of you like Rebecca, for example, who's getting trained on Friday, make sure you ask about this stuff. I'm sure you will. And for now, I'm going to hand back to Danny, because that's my slot done for now. And I hope you found that useful.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for that. So yeah, good information there, really useful. And just to reiterate again, this thing with the certainty and the links to stress and the links to stress hormones. I think we've all been there when we don't feel like we have the full picture, the full information, or when we hear information secondhand, or even worse nowadays is sometimes, companies, they release information on social media before they tell their employees. That's very stressful. It's very demeaning to people's status, and it causes lots of stressful situations that don't need to exist. So the next bit of our webinar today is about using optimise schedule messages to keep your agents informed of things that you can know about in advance and that you want to remind them of regularly, so that they have the knowledge and autonomy to handle questions and incidents when they come in on the phone. So they're forewarned is forearmed, so to speak. This increases their status, it gives them certainty, it lets them feel in control of events and the future. And all of these things are only positive. This is going to help people to stay sort of calm, relaxed, ready to go, not experience social pain, and they're going to feel secure and trusted. And that's really important for lowering stress hormones. So the template in the background now, the blue message about the planned motorway maintenance that you can see every few minutes coming on. I'm going to hand over to Optimise guru Sarah, and she's going to talk us through how you can go about setting up a scheduled message using the Optimise designer. Are you there, Sarah?
I am indeed, yeah. Thanks, Danny.
Over to you.
Yeah. Okay, so can you see my screen?
I can.
Yeah. Can you, Steph? Can you, Ian? Steve?
Yeah, I can see the screen.
That's great. Okay. So in order to schedule a message, the first thing we need to do is set up a trigger. And a trigger is what will make the message appear at the time required. So this is the optimized system here. Many of you may have seen it already. We just need to go into triggers and add a new trigger. Okay. We then need to give the trigger a name. So in this example, we can call it roadworks message. Okay, and the next thing we need to do is set up the conditions and the actions of the trigger, which means we're telling the system how and when we want the message to display. Right, okay. So in this example, we don't want the trigger to play a sound, like it has the option in there. And we also don't want the font or the background color to change. We just want it to show for now. Okay. We then click add, and this will automatically save the trigger for us. Okay, so once we've got the trigger set up, we can open the page we're currently working on. Just give it a minute. Okay, and this is the designer part of the system, and this is where the templates get created. So once the trigger is set up, we now need to apply it to the label. Okay, and we actually have a label already set up here, which has been pre-designed beforehand, and it's been created to inform agents about planned roadworks, as you can see. This will create greater certainty and autonomy for the agents, which is obviously great. Okay, we then go into the page and we then select the trigger we have just set up from the drop down. I have to apologise, there is a lot of triggers in here. So that's been selected. Now you can change the styling of the label. So you can change the font size, the color, the background. You can even add a border. But for now, we'll just set up as is. Okay. So once the trigger is set to the label and you're happy with the styling of it, it's now been attached. We now just save. And then the message is ready to view and schedule at the time you required. And it's as simple as that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarah.
No problem.
I'm just going to grab myself back over here, and there's a little screenshot there. You can see I've just taken that of the visual as the scheduled message pops up there, so everyone can see. There's going to be maybe some calls coming in about delays or other things happening there because of this planned road closure. Just helps give people a little bit more certainty and autonomy to handle the kind of questions that they're going to start to get. All right then, so moving on to the next bit of our webinar, we're going to talk a little bit. We're going to sort of have a little look at this example wallboard from Optimise and how it compares with traditional wallboard design. And hopefully you can start to recognize some of the things in traditional wallboard design that might be actually inadvertently causing some of the stress, absenteeism, sickness, and turnover things that you're experiencing because of the way they've been set up and designed. And we like to use this term SCARF compliant. So we always try to make sure that we develop and we display SCARF compliant wallboards, and we want our customers to also be deploying really SCARF compliant wallboards. That is the power and magic behind the system. So I'm going to hand back over to CEO Steve Pace, who's going to talk a little bit more about the comparisons between a SCARF compliant and a non-SCARF compliant wallboard visual setup. Are you there, Steve?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Just changed to an NHS screen grab there for you.
Okay, yeah, so this is not a specific dig at the NHS by any means. This is just an example, and there are loads of them out there of what I mean by a traditional wallboard. Something that displays only call handling metrics, doesn't necessarily interact with any other data source, and is deployed with the intention to improve call handling metrics and customer experience, but as I mentioned before, doesn't have any of the elements which will encourage the very people that can create those positive experiences, and those very people who can either work harder for you or go slower to actually change their behavior. And change in any organization, the vast majority of that comes from people. If you're to succeed in any business, you need to be able to influence people to change. And to do that, the SCARF model is a fantastic tool to be able to do that, because if people feel like they're valued and wanted and they're being treated fairly, they're far more likely to work for you. They're far more likely to come in if they feel a little bit unwell. Obviously not something that I would encourage at the moment with the COVID pandemic, but I'm sure you understand where I'm coming from. So to put things in perspective a little bit, these types of wallboards, I mean, I've been in contact centers for 25 years, and these types of wallboards haven't really changed in the last, I'd say, 15 to 20 years. They're still being sold today, and to me it seems a bit of a waste of that lovely shiny flat screen full HD TV that you've got, and a missed opportunity to, whereas we could create an environment that really meets the needs of your employees and is capable of reducing the stress and workforce issues which often hamper a contact centre. And certainly from the people I've spoken to within the emergency services, those guys are struggling with keeping hold of people, finding good people, and keeping people motivated. Rebecca and I were on in a customer session the end of last year, and we spoke to some people actually from the NHS, and they were struggling with those very things. So anything we can do with the wallboards to improve those areas is obviously key. Now, putting the design of this screen, which is obviously very plain, doesn't really do anything from an employee engagement perspective, putting that design to one side for a minute, you'll notice that this traditional wallboard contains a lot more call handling metrics than we had on the optimise template that we were showing you earlier. Now, does this mean that the optimise template won't help you meet your call handling targets? Now, I know that the police are under a huge amount of pressure to answer those 999 calls as quickly as possible. And I know that you're monitored by the government to do that. And I can understand there's a huge amount of pressure around that. But based on the last 25 years working in contact centres, analysing metrics, sitting with agents, talking to supervisors, talking to managers, and actually running a contact centre for myself, where I had my own agents that I had to convince to do a hard day's work and deliver a great service. I'm confident to say, and the neuroscience backs me up here, that to improve any metric, the behaviour of those people who influence those metrics has to change. Now, the change only comes in those people if they feel happier, if they feel more fairly treated, if they feel more valued, if they feel more respected, or they feel more supported than they did before you introduced the wallboard, the piece of technology, the process change, the whatever, the new training, the new recruitment, whatever it is that you're doing within your organization. Unless people feel better, happier about that change, you're not going to experience the improvements in the performance. And if we're talking about call handling metrics here, just making your call handlers feel more valued, feel more respected, feel more, making them feel more supported is going to increase your performance on call handling metrics much more than placing a screen in front of them with loads of red and loads of numbers. So it's really, for us, it's really about the human element and making sure that we encourage those people that have a huge responsibility to deal with all manner of issues on the telephone. Now, I know, I don't know your operations in any great detail. I mean, like I say, we've got 8 police customers who rely on optimise. But I don't know I don't know the ins and outs of every control room in the UK. But I think it's fair to say that call handlers can make the same decisions and do just as much to help you hit your 999 and 101 call handling targets with just 3 metrics. Now, if you add to this the fact that the human brain is wired to avoid stress and negativity, so you'll find that call handlers will subconsciously ignore over negative metrics. They will subconsciously ignore metrics that they have no control over. So putting my more analytical hat on, I would say that if you're using a SCARF compliant wallboard template, you only really need 3 call handling metrics, because the other metrics are probably going to be ignored because they're more supervisory type metrics. So the 3 key metrics, get to the point, Steve, Danny's saying to me. The 3 key metrics here are calls in queue, so in other words, demand. So your calls in queue is the demand on your control room, your emergency services contact center. Agents available is the second metric, and this is your supply. This is your resource. This is how much resource you have available to respond to that demand, which is your calls in queue. Now, some of you will be dealing with chat, some of you are dealing with email as well. At the moment, we're just focusing on calls, okay? The third metric, which gives you an overall view of performance, is SLA. Now, if you think about that, and you think about the screen we had before with your average wait, your abandoned calls, your average talk time, and all of these supervisory type metrics that your supervisors can look at on their phone systems, they can look at with their historic reports, and they can identify trends, and they can, they can optimize workforce resources, workforce optimization, all that type of stuff. They can tweak the way the phone system behaves, the way the calls are routed, and all of that stuff is great, absolutely fantastic. And that's what those metrics are for. All of those averages, all of those, total calls taken, all of that stuff. None of those metrics will allow your call handlers to do any more than they can do with just these 3 key metrics. Calls in queue, i.e. demand, available agents, i.e. supply, and SLA, i.e. overall performance. Because what they can do is limited. They can't hang up on somebody who has an intruder in their house because they need to get your call handling KPIs up, and you've had a meeting about it, and you've not performed very well in the previous quarter, you need to up your game. They can't just hang up. So there's only certain things they can do. So if we add some well thought out triggers to your SCARF compliant template, which is focusing on reducing stress, and we create these triggers in such a way that they remind your agents of what's going on, remind them to look up and check what's going on. You can start to create a much more balanced display, a much more balanced contact center where people feel like they're being treated fairly, rather than a screen that just focuses on how quickly they answer the telephone, something that really focuses on them, what their needs are. And this is where you start to reduce stress, and you start to place those call handlers, and this is really key, you place those call handlers in a state of mind where they can drive the changes and improvements in all areas of their role. Until somebody is in that state of mind, then it's very, very difficult for them to focus on doing their absolute best because they're suffering with social pain. So what do I mean by well thought out triggers? So you've got your core metrics. Now with Optimise, there's nothing stopping you having a trigger or a message appear or a sound appear based on a metric that is not displayed on your wallboards. So you can save on space, and you can actually have messages popping up that will have exactly the same effect as you would hope to have by having the number on the screen. So that's really, really important. But what's also important is how well we inform the call handlers that they need to change their behavior can be the difference between a fair warning that things are going wrong and action needs to be taken, or an unnecessary panic. So when we talk about triggers, you'll often see, and I often talk to customer service managers that still have a trigger set or a threshold set on their wallboard, which is linked to just one metric. And it's the metric that they feel is the most important. And I can understand why people think this way. They don't all understand SCARF. They don't all necessarily understand the way the human brain functions. But calls weighting seems to be the main focal point. Now, if you have a traditional wallboard and you have a trigger set on calls weighting and nothing else, then you run the risk of creating unnecessary panic, and that will increase stress, that will increase adrenaline, and it will have that effect on your absenteeism, on people trying to run away from the problem. So let's say, for example, your operation is experiencing an unexpected spike in call volumes. Now, as soon as that happens, that trigger is alerted, that trigger is triggered, that threshold is triggered. Everything goes red, noises, and all the rest of it. Now, if your call handlers are all busy doing a fantastic job dealing with calls, and you have no more resource, don't these negative messages simply state the obvious? And don't these messages and the color changes treat those hardworking people unfairly? Don't these messages lower their status and add a layer of stress that's unnecessary? So what we're going to show you in a moment, and Steph Caney is going to show you, is how we can create intelligent triggers and how we can help you with the optimized product to avoid penalizing call handlers unnecessarily, and show you how to drive the right behavior with fairness in mind.
Thank you, Steve.
Dan, back to you.
Yeah, thanks. I think you summed it up for me brilliantly when we were talking about this webinar. You said a great phrase that I'm going to put into some marketing materials. You said traditional wallboards show what people expect wallboards to show, which I think is quite a powerful message, actually. And I think I've got one more example of another template that we've got with the same different design, but the same 3 essential metrics on the left-hand side there as a consistent sort of anchor. But thank you for leading us into the segue to the intelligent triggers. So it's just a little bit from me about what we mean by intelligent triggers, and hopefully you can all see the points here as they pop up on the screen. So intelligent triggers, as Steve said, are triggers that allow you to program alerts which appear only when a certain set of predetermined conditions are met. This is going to allow you to make sure that your agents aren't being unfairly treated, shouted at, penalized, whatever it might be. And this is going to let them have autonomy, certainty, without the status being demeaned. You're going to get lower adrenaline, increased dopamine, and all the good benefits that go along sort of with that. And we do have Steph, our optimise guru, in the background waiting to show us an example of how we can set up an intelligent trigger. So Steph's going to show us how to set up this resource running low trigger, which you can see on screen right now. Are you there, Steph?
I'm here. Hi, everybody.
I'm passing over to you.
Thanks, Danny. Yeah, so as Danny said, I'm going to show you how to create that resources low trigger. So I know, Rebecca, I know you're on the call. I'll be doing this training with you on Friday. So I'll obviously cover things in a lot more detail then, but for now I'm just going to go through the basics of it and how it works. So as Steve and Danny have said, in order to treat people fairly and reduce stress, we don't want to alarm agents unnecessarily, unless there's calls in the queue to actually be handled and there's not enough agents to take those calls. And with that in mind, the trigger that I'm going to set up is the resources low one. So it's based on that. So it's those 2 factors of when there are a certain number of calls waiting in the queue and not enough agents to take those calls. So can everybody see my screen okay? Danny, Sarah, Steve, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes,
sorry, yes, I can see it. Yes.
Okay, fabulous. So I'm just in the trigger menu here. I'm just going to go and add in a trigger. Okay, so this is similar to what Sarah did before, but this is for the resources low pop-up, as we know. So I'm just going to call this resources low pop-up. Okay, and again, you've got your conditions and your actions. So your conditions are what need to happen in order for the trigger to appear, and then the actions are the result of that. So the action, what we want to happen. So in this case, the conditions are when there's a certain number of calls in the queue. So I'm just going to go in now and choose from the data, call handling. So this is queued calls. So this condition that I'm setting up here is I'm going to say when there are 3 or more calls in the queue. And the other condition we want is when there are not enough agents to take those calls. So again, going back into the data. Agents available. Okay. Nope, less than or equal to 3. So you can obviously set this up as you want with your own numbers in mind. It completely depends on the amount of calls that generated that come through into your particular contact center. I'm just doing this one as an example. So we can see here when there's 3 or more calls in the queue, but less than 3 agents. So we know that there's not enough agents to take calls, but there's a lot of calls coming in. And the action that we want is to show. So we want whatever that's attached to, when those conditions apply, we want that element to actually appear and show up on the screen. Okay. I'm going to add that trigger in. So our trigger's set up, so we just need to go into our page. Just open up now. The page, I think it's this one here. Okay. So this is the message. If I just go in here, I'm just opening it up. And this section here, assign triggers, is where we set it up. We can see we've already got a trigger on there, but I'll show you the one that I actually set up, which was, where is it? The bottom here of this list. Nope. Okay. But it will appear here. I might not have saved it when I set it up, but it would appear in the list for you to select. And then you just click OK, and then you save publish, and it pushes back to the designer, to the screen. So you can see on this video here, it shows up. And then you can see when it disappears. So yeah, as I say, we want that to appear when at the right time, rather than just having a resources low for whenever there's no agents available. You know, the best time to do it is when there's too many calls as well. So it's those 2 factors that we need to take into account. Okay, I think I need to hand you back, Danny.
That was great. Thanks, Steph. I can take over, I think, this one. Hopefully we're back on the slideshow now. And so we're basically almost at the end now of our webinar for today. So this is a good point to just kind of review what we were hoping you would get from today's session. So by now, our hour is almost up. We hope you know these 2 things, and we hope you can do these 2 things. So we hope you know a little bit more about the SCARF neuroscience behind optimise and behind our approach, and use that in any situation, not just in the workplace, but in any situation to help lower stress and minimize stressful situations. We hope you know a little bit more about how traditional wallboards can be kind of inadvertently contributing to the problem of stress by lacking in SCARF compliance. And we hope that you can use some information that you've got today to help you design more SCARF compliant visuals and apply the neuroscience to managing your people and lowering the stress that you may be dealing with in your contact center. After the webinar, we are going to send out a little survey, just 5 quick questions. We're planning to hold a second session for police forces contact centers. We want to know a little bit from you, just very quickly, the kind of things you would want us to cover so that we can put together a really useful and meaningful follow-up session for you. Is there anything that anyone on the call thinks that I've missed and forgotten to say from today's session?
No, I think that's fine, Danny. Very, very good. Thank you very much to Steph and Sarah for their demonstrations and for you putting this together. And hopefully everybody, yeah, no worries. Hopefully everybody's enjoyed it and found it useful. As Danny said, there is a survey going out, so let us know. Give us some input, even if you're one of our technology partners. Do let us know what you thought of the session, if you found it useful, if it's something that you could use. And we will do more of these sessions in the future. We've got some ideas for part 2, but we want to get your feedback and make sure that we're on the right track. And then finally, if there's any organisations that you want to tell about these webinars, then do let us know. We'll make sure that we contact them when the next one's due and they get the invites. So whether you're a police force and you've got a neighbouring police force that you think would find this useful, then do let us know. The event's been recorded, so we can also share this recording with those people. The objective is just to help emergency services, contact centres reduce stress, and that's our goal.
So yeah, thank you, Steve, and thank you to Steph and Sarah as well for their input, and thank you everyone that attended. And we'll post the recording on our website in the coming few days. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.